The Cold War. The Cold War started with the Berlin Wall. So it started as barbed wire fence dividing the city. It's imprisoning its people, and West Germany and West Berlin become more fluent. East Germans begin to flee their country for their neighbor. Khrushchev demands that the British, French, and Americans leave West Berlin, but the decline in peaceful prosperity sounds far out of reach. Soviets walk out on the Paris summit of 1960 because of the U-2 incident. West Germany was NATO's front line along the Iron Curtain. Since 1955, the Americans had been a German on NATO's nuclear trigger. West Berlin is surrounded by French, British, Soviet, and German troops. Western Germany has a four-power agreement. In November 1958, the West rejected Khrushchev's Berlin proposals. Khrushchev now offered East German leader Walter a peace treaty. In September 1959, in 1955, Nikita Khrushchev became the first Soviet leader to visit America. On the eve of a grand peacemaking summit in Paris, an American U-2 spy plane was shot down in Soviet airspace. On the right, that is Khrushchev. In 1955, East Germany celebrated 10 years of socialist achievement. The Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall was a guarded concrete barrier that physically and ideologically divided Berlin from 1961 to 1989. This meant that East Germany and West Germany were divided, that neither family, if you had a family from East Germany and you lived in West Germany, you weren't able to see your family on the other side. It cut off West Germany and West Berlin together, and then East Germany was on the other side. So it cut off from the whole world. So it started to get torn down on June 13th, 1990, and it finished by 1992. The barrier was surrounded by barbed wire fence, large concrete walls. It had a death strip. It had trenches, soldiers that were told to shoot on command. Around 100,000 people attempted to escape, and over 5,000 people succeeded in escaping over the wall, with an estimated death toll ranging from 136 to more than 200 in around Berlin. The picture on the left in the top corner is barbed wire fences that would surround in between East and West Berlin. The bottom left corner is the wall after before it was taken down, but after the treaty was signed. So this is graffiti all over the wall, which people did to give a little positivity in a terrible time back in the day. So in the right-hand corner at the top, the Berlin Wall was 11 to 13 feet high, stretching from 28 miles long. This is after it was negotiated that the wall was not put in place anymore and eventually would be torn down. So it's the Germans climbing the walls to see family, friends, or even seeing the other side. The bottom right-hand corner is during the Berlin Wall years and it being built. So this is showing how they're building it, and the commanders surrounding it. So Kennedy agreed to meet Khrushchev at Vienna in June 1961. On August the 12th, Soviet and East German forces were mobilized. In 1963, Kennedy visited West Berlin. So on August 12, 1962, East German security forces began to build the Berlin Wall. There was a standoff between us and Soviet forces. In 1963, Kennedy visits West Berlin. So in 1963, President Kennedy delivers his famous I am a Berliner speech, which is also Ich bin ein Berliner. The speech was given in 1963 by the United States President So that was one of John F. Kennedy's most famous speeches because it brought, since it was so since it was videotaped and posted throughout the United States and Germany and other countries, it created chaos, but it created prosperity for the Berliners and hope for a better future. So they could rely on President Kennedy as a supporter for their country and to one day unite East and West Berlin. So the Cuba, it was throughout the 1940s and 1950s, the Caribbean island of Cuba was where many Americans go to have a lot of fun on their days off. So, like, they go to the beaches, they go for alcohol, they go to the casinos, and they have sex with women. The sex with women part is not always the greatest part because most of the women were underage and coming home to their poor families and bringing money, and it went from girls having a high and successful future to being prostitutes on the street for easier money for their families so they could feed and clothe and have water and have a roof over their head. So it was more the kids supporting their families than the parents supporting their families. So that's why a lot of Americans coming to Cuba didn't necessarily make the Cubans very pleased with the American people and the American soldiers. So Cuba's land was almost all owned by American corporations, and Cuba's leader was Fulgencio Batista, and he was a brutal dictator to his people, and the people of Cuba was slowly turning against him because of what he was doing to his own people and their country and the laws he was enforcing. So he was very brutal and aggressive dictator. And after many years of guerrilla warfare in the mountains, a 33-year-old lawyer, which is Fidel Castro, entered Havana on January 8th, 1959. So he went to like the wilderness to look for something in himself, and he came out realizing that Batista wasn't good for his country or good for the people of Cuba. So over 500 members of the former regiment were accused of crimes against the people. So they were tried and then later executed. Many fled to exile to the US to escape from being executed. So Castro nationalized millions of acres of land helped by American companies and gave it to his own people. Castro fled to New York to speak at the United Nations about his new revolution. And President Eisenhower couldn't attend because he was too busy. But Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet leader, he was happy, very, very, very happy to embrace a new revolutionary and offered Castro economic assistance to his country in support of Cuba's assistance with them or loyalty, more likely. So Cuba bought oil from the Soviet Union, and this was cheaper. So American companies refused to refine the oil for Cuba,